Tommy Shannon never needed the spotlight. In a world of screaming frontmen and blistering solos, he was the silent one, the pulse, the heartbeat, the shadow. While others chased fame, attention, and the chaos of rock and roll excess, Tommy stood in the background with a 1962 Fender jazz bass in his hands, laying down lines that were as essential to the sound as they were invisible to most ears. And that's how he preferred it. Born in Tucson, Arizona in 1946 but raised in Dumas, Texas, Tommy's musical journey was less about ambition and more about survival. From a young age, he found comfort in the deep vibrations of blues and rock music, sounds that made sense in a world that rarely did. He first picked up a bass in high school, and like many of his generation, found himself swept into the tidal wave of American rock culture at just the right moment, when something gritty and raw was replacing the polished smiles of pop. He met Johnny Winter in the 1960s, and by 1968, Tommy was on stage at Woodstock, standing beside a young, pale Texan with fire in his fingers and a scream in his soul. Playing for 500,000 people would have been the peak for most, but for Tommy, it was just a moment. One moment in a long, painful, beautiful, and deeply human journey that few ever truly noticed, while Johnny Winter flew into stardom with his high-speed blues solos. Tommy played the part of the anchor, grounded, solid, present. But even anchors can drift. As the 70s rolled in, the music scene descended into a haze of heroin, cocaine, and alcohol, and Tommy, like so many others, found himself pulled under. Addiction didn't hit like a car crash. It was slow. A little more every week. A little less of yourself each time. And soon, the music didn't feel the same. The gigs blurred together. The years passed in fragments. He played on and off, but the joy of it was buried under the weight of dependency. For most of the 1970s, Tommy Shannon vanished into the underbelly of the music industry, a place filled with backrooms, needles, unpaid royalties, and broken promises. But then something happened. Something life-altering. In the late 70s, in Austin, Texas, he walked into a bar called Alexander's and heard a guitarist that made time stop. That guitarist was Stevie Ray Vaughan. What he saw wasn't just talented, was raw, spiritual, transcendent power. And that night changed both their lives. Tommy joined Double Trouble in 1981, and everything shifted. The band, Stevie on guitar and vocals, Chris Layton on drums, and Tommy on bass, became one of the most electrifying blues rock groups in modern music. Their chemistry was instant, unforced, almost mystical. Tommy didn't just play behind Stevie, he lifted him. He gave him room to burn, to breathe, to scream. Songs like Texas Flood, Pride and Joy, and Cold Shot weren't just showcases for Stevie's virtuosity, they were foundations laid by Shannon's steady hand. He never asked for credit, but his fingerprints were on everything. He was the quiet wall the storm crashed against. But behind the scenes, the darkness lingered. Fame brought more drugs, more alcohol, more pressure. Stevie began spiraling, and while most stood back in awe or fear, Tommy stayed close. Because he saw it. He'd been there. He knew what it felt like to lose yourself completely. In 1986, after collapsing from years of abuse, Stevie was taken to a hospital in London, where doctors told him he was close to death. That moment was a wake-up call, not just for Stevie, but for Tommy too. What followed was rare in rock and roll, a shared redemption. Tommy didn't let Stevie go into rehab alone. He went with him. They checked in together, got clean together, cried together, not as bandmates, but as brothers. And from that point on, Double Trouble wasn't just a band, it was a bond. The music they made after sobriety had a new kind of fire. It wasn't the reckless blaze of youth, it was the controlled burn of men who had seen the edge and chosen to come back. Their 1989 album In Step was a testament to that journey. Songs like Tightrope and Wall of Denial spoke to their struggle, their pain, and their triumph. Tommy was never flashy on bass, but every note he played came from the same place of truth. And in a world where so many artists wore masks, Tommy stood as one of the rare few who played without one. Then, in 1990, it all came crashing down. On August 27th, after a triumphant show in East Troy, Wisconsin, Stevie Ray Vaughan boarded a helicopter in dense fog. The helicopter crashed into the side of a ski hill shortly after takeoff. There were no survivors. The world lost a legend. Tommy lost a brother. And just like that, everything stopped. In the days that followed, while the media swarmed and tributes poured in, Tommy Shannon went silent. He didn't chase headlines or book interviews. He grieved privately, deeply. Stevie had been more than a bandleader, he had been the one who helped Tommy find meaning again, find purpose, find himself. And now he was gone. For many musicians, that moment would have sparked a farewell tour or a tribute album. But Tommy did something else. He walked away. He didn't stop playing, not completely. But he stepped back, way back. He moved to a quiet ranch in Texas with his wife. He raised horses. He played music for himself. He helped others in recovery. He kept the bass in his hands, but he didn't chase stages anymore. There were no comebacks, no reinventions, no desperate attempts to stay relevant in a changing industry. He lived simply, cleanly, and most of all, honestly. That honesty defined his entire life. While others made headlines for overdoses, arrests, and outrageous behavior, Tommy stayed in the margins, where the real stories live. He showed that the blues wasn't just a genre, it was a survival strategy, a way to live with your pain and keep moving anyway. In the years that followed Stevie's death, Double Trouble would occasionally reunite, sometimes backing other artists like Kenny Wayne Shepherd, but it was never the same. Tommy's playing was still solid, still soulful, but the magic had shifted. It's not that the music died, it's that the spirit he had found with Stevie couldn't be replicated. That kind of chemistry only happens once in a lifetime. And, rather than dilute it, Tommy let it rest. He became something rare in music, a man who knew when to step back. He never tried to outshine Stevie's legacy. He never made it about himself. Instead, he honored that legacy by living with dignity, grace, and gratitude. He stayed sober. He stayed grounded. He stayed kind. To those who knew him, Tommy Shannon was a gentle giant, soft-spoken, generous, deeply spiritual. He wasn't the kind to hold grudges or talk about the old days with bitterness. When asked about the past, he'd often speak with a kind of quiet sorrow, but also with peace. He once said that the blues had saved his life more than once, and you could hear that in every note he played. The tragedy of Tommy Shannon is not in scandals or tabloid drama, it's in how quietly he carried his pain, how gracefully he endured loss, how silently he disappeared from the spotlight after helping shape one of the greatest chapters in blues rock history. In a different world, Tommy Shannon might have been a household name, but he never chased that. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to be real. And in an industry built on illusions, that made him one of the rarest of all. The blues are often romanticized, turned into stylized riffs and sad lyrics, but Tommy lived them, not in a way that demanded pity, but in a way that demanded respect. His life was a long, winding bassline, steady, soulful, sometimes mournful, always true. From Woodstock to Rehab, from Stevie to Silence, from Stage Lights to Sunset. Skies on a Texas ranch, Tommy Shannon lived a story few ever saw and fewer still understood. No scandals, no ego, just rhythm, heart, and resilience. And maybe that's the greatest tragedy of all, that someone so essential, so deeply human, so profoundly good, could remain in the background while the world celebrated louder, flashier names. But for those who know, who really know, Tommy Shannon isn't just a sideman. He's a legend, a survivor, a brother, a bass player who never needed the spotlight because the truth was always in the shadows, where he quietly stood, holding the music together with hands that had seen both hell and grace. Subscribe to Hollywood Untold for more emotional stories behind music legends and the feuds that shaped rock history. Tap the bell to never miss a beat.